Hello, and welcome to a special video episode of Talking Tropes.
Where the real treasure was the tropes we made along the way.
Indeed. Today we're going to be talking about anime and the different genres within that. So we're going to start with shonen, which is the opposite of shoujo and also the opposite of seinen.
I don't know about the opposite, but shonen and shoujo do tend to be defined in opposition to each other.
Sure.
Mostly because they're first created as demographic terms and have since sort of come to have specific trope delineations that go into each one.
Basically, shonen anime is boys anime and shoujo is for girls.
Yeah. In general. Yeah.
So if you want to think about it in terms of shows that you might recognize, if you're new to anime, then shonen is Dragon Ball Z.
And shoujo is Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura, stuff like that.
Yeah, all that stuff that we grew up on. We basically just got the kids' version of anime.
And those were made for kids. Like nothing wrong with that.
What are some of the tropes of shonen and shoujo?
Sure, I think a really good basic level for those of you who may have not watched Dragon Ball or Sailor Moon. I think a really good one sentence difference between the two is that shoujo is more about kick butt girls who with subplots of romance and personal growth, whereas shonen is kick butt dudes with subplots of physical power growth and friendship.
Yes.
Friendship's
pretty consistent between all children's shows of all kinds, in all countries.
In all countries. And I think these tropes can all be found in both versions, but I think shoujo tends to go towards, it's about the girl, learning to be a, strong person and, stand up for herself and things like that.
Right, overcoming weakness.
Right, overcoming personal, internal weaknesses, while for boys it's more about overcoming...
Who's the big bad?
External weaknesses, I'm not strong enough to
beat
punch
that guy.
Yeah.
Punching is, I think, in terms of the difference in violence, you'll notice that in shows like Sailor Moon, the violence is through magical friendship laser beams.
Right.
Whereas in more shonen anime, it tends to be more punching. Guys tend to like that physical machismo punch violence.
Right. And even in shows where that's not necessarily, punching, it's not a fighting anime, so to speak, it's Beyblade or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever.
It'll still be about dramatic posing, I guess. We don't understand.
But there's usually a punch gets thrown outside of necessarily the tournament aspect of it. There's still some sort of violence to it.
Yeah, in Pokemon, which is pretty distinct shonen, you would see the violence is taken away from the children, but it's given to these monsters.
But people punch each other in Pokemon every now and again, don't they?
But it gets censored as fuck here in the West.
Now you sort of understand those two different reasons. We're mostly going to be talking about shonen today, and sort of also talking about... So if shonen is for young boys, then for teenagers we have...
Seinen.
Yes.
And we think we're pronouncing that right.
We think we are. Please yell at us if we're not.
Seinen basically just means boy anime for grown-ups. It tends to include a lot more explicit violence or sexuality.
Yes.
More adult themes and more grown-up characters.
More grown-up characters, and it also tends to be subversions of shonen and shonen tropes.
Right. And I think that you're going to find whenever you have a genre that's based on demographics, there's going to be a lot of genre blur.
Totally.
Because we all know that there were kids much younger than us reading Harry Potter, and there were adults who read Harry Potter, because it was just a good series.
Exactly. So we're going to be talking about the differences between seinen and shonen, and sort of as an interesting case study, we're going to talk about, mostly specifically, Fullmetal Alchemist, both the 2003 original version, which we'll call FMA.
And the 2009 rebooted version that was more closely related to the manga, called Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. So we'll call them FMA,
and
Brotherhood to distinguish.
Hopefully we'll stick to that.
Yeah. Come along with us. So, Fullmetal Alchemist is the story of two brothers living in a world where alchemy develops instead of chemistry or traditional modern science, and they use it as a sort of magic tool to try and bring their mother back to life. It fails horribly, and they lose their bodies and have to go on a journey to get them back.
Yeah. And so they're searching for the Philosopher's Stone.
Yes.
I got that quest.
Another Harry Potter crossover.
It's basically just Harry Potter.
Some of the tropes involved with shonen that we typically see are things like fighting for friendship being like a heavy thematic trope.
Totally.
What else?
Lots of training montages, getting stronger.
Right. It ties very heavily into, I think, the general ethos of Japan as a country, as a culture.
Right.
And it definitely plays into the power fantasy of children that you just are getting stronger every day.
Totally. And as a kid, that's very true. You are literally every day you're better than you were the day before.
Right. Children are the worst.
Curse them. No. So there's also a huge cast of characters.
Right.
A lot of
which plays into the friendship theme.
Right.
If you're if you're doing a friendship theme and you only have 3 characters, it's kind of lame. Right.
Well, and it's about the idea that you can make this community sort of around you or whatever.
Training.
Yeah. So there's the never give up attitude. There tends to be a lack of romance or a downplaying of romance.
Right. That's more in comparison to shoujo than in comparison to more adult anime.
But I think also in comparison to more adult anime.
Oh yeah, that's fair. If you look at more seinen, you'll find more adult romance played realistically.
A lot of times in shonen, there's the rule of almost no hugging and definitely no kissing, you know? Fullmetal Alchemist has some, pretty clear romance ships that the narrative is pushing, yet literally our main characters don't even kiss at the end, ever.
That is true. In either version.
So, in general, women tend to be side characters in shonen, though not always, and that doesn't mean that the women in them are,
bad
poorly
characters.
Written.
No, but they just tend to fall into support roles, love interests, healers.
Yeah.
A lot of the same tropes that you find in big action movies that are male centric.
Totally.
It's just women are an afterthought.
Sure. So then there's big bads followed by bigger bads.
Right. There's always a really evil singular villain, or usually it's a big organization with a leader at the top.
Right. You sort of have to work your way through the ranks to beat up that guy. Kill la Kill is a great example.
You gotta defeat all the generals.
Right.
What were they? They were the generals, right?
The 4-star students or whatever.
And then you get to the head of the class, and then so hierarchy is a big thing, and I guess you could read a lot of shonen anime as a destruction of hierarchy.
Sure, yeah, I think that definitely is a
singular individual going up against a big organization with one singular leader at the top.
Yeah,
punching him to death.
Though simultaneously a big motivation for most shonen characters, I would say, is that they want to be the best. They're not the best yet, and they want to
be the best there ever was.
That's it's Naruto, it's One Piece, it's Bleach. It's they just want to be the best ninja.
And we all know that one of the things that resonated with kids about Pokemon was wanting to be a Pokemon master.
Yeah.
That phrase just kind of triggered something in children.
Do you want it's the first power fantasy you've ever been exposed to, basically.
And power fantasy is just huge in these. Dragon Ball Z, I think most recently he's assumed the power of gods.
Oh,
and
I wouldn't
is more powerful than anyone else in the universe. And is now fucking around in other universes.
Yeah, so those are, I think, the big tend to be a lot of the big denoters, the tropes that are in shonen in general.
So let's see how they apply to Fullmetal Alchemist. Does Ed want to be the best alchemist in the land?
No, he already is.
I wouldn't say that necessarily, but he's this total prodigy.
Yes.
I think did we mention him in our Prodigy Children episode?
I think we might have.
In any case, he's very talented, but his goals are a lot more specific. They don't really have anything to do with being better than other people.
Right. He
wants to get his body back and his brother's body back.
Exactly. And to do that, he might need to become better. But it's not like he has this drive to be the best alchemist there ever was, like no one was before. So I think that's a really interesting character difference. And that's true in both Brotherhood and FMA.
Right. That's pretty core to the thrust of the show is that they have a really good motivation.
Yeah, and on that track, I think we also don't see a lot of the brothers. So there's Edward and Alphonse. That's the older brother, Al's the younger brother. We don't see a lot of them training necessarily.
No, we have literally one shot in each anime of them sparring. And then they spar again whenever Al's body gets fixed because it was shattered into a million pieces.
Broken. So there's that, and we get one backstory episode on them training with their teacher, but most of that isn't about the training necessarily.
No, it's more about the philosophy.
Right, it's about the philosophy that comes out of that, and the character development that is happening, not necessarily the gains, no sick gains.
They don't go to protein bars.
Right, and that's the other thing is through the thrust of the main series, I don't think we ever really see them get that amazingly better, there's no power-up scenes.
Not really. There's a few things that we kind of assume that they've picked up some more skills along the way, but it's nothing to the extent of, Naruto, where
I've learned a new jutsu,
and now I can transform everyone into rocks.
Exactly. Or
I can summon the power of the sun and shoot a laser beam.
Right. And it's interesting because in the final thrust of Brotherhood, the villain sort of goes through this power-up sequence that sort of happens.
Right. So in a sense, maybe it does sort of follow that same thing as Dragon Ball Z, where it has villains who I'm going to transform. Just you wait.
You haven't seen my final form.
My final form, exactly.
Right.
So, I think that's kind of with Father, the main villain of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. He's constantly just I'm unstoppable right now because I'm a living Philosopher's Stone. Right. But now I'm going to
be even more unstoppable.
I'm going to swallow the powers of God. And then how do you defeat the powers of God? By punching them. Not really.
It's friendship.
It's by punching a lot.
But it's friendship punching.
But what's really friendship about that in the end of Brotherhood?
They're all together and
they're all just around him, just chilling out, finish him! Come on, this has been going on all day.
Well, greed, there's a noble sacrifice that happens.
That's true. Noble sacrifices are very big in this. And I think what distinguishes shonen anime from a lot of American action anime is their unflinching willingness to show some direct violence. It's just different standards between Japan and America that, kids somehow got away with a lot of bloody violence and muscled men punching each other.
Yeah. But and I guess you're right, because I'm thinking of Powerpuff Girls, which that had some violence in it,
but not really a lot of bloody violence or death. Death is something that's extremely taboo in children's shows in America, but not so much in Japan. And heroic deaths were very much the norm. And for sure, Fullmetal Alchemist had some heroic deaths. It had Greed, who is the living personification of greed, but it also has Maze Hughes.
Friends. Oh, but that's not a...
It's not a heroic sacrifice, it's a tragic death. I guess that's the thing. There were a lot more tragic deaths in Fullmetal Alchemist than there were heroic sacrifices.
Right, and we don't get those heroic sacrifices until sort of the end.
Are there any female characters in Fullmetal Alchemist?
Oh, there's so many. There's a bunch. This is literally one of my favorite like Shonen Seinen type shows where the protagonist isn't a woman, where I do just think so many of the female characters are so well written.
I'll grant that they're very well written, but they do still serve those kind of support roles.
Sure,
for
definitely.
the most part. You've got in Brotherhood.
Let's talk about FMA first, and then talk about Brotherhood.
Okay.
Yeah. In FMA. Who the female characters? Who they at? We got Winry.
Winry is complete support, complete romantic subplot. She spends most of the series at home in their hometown, just sort of pining for Ed and waiting for him to come home, and occasionally being the medic and fixing his robot arms that he uses.
Right,
to
and
punch.
she sort of acts as a grounding heart a lot of times for the brothers when they're feeling at their most lost.
Yeah. The don't ever give up.
Right.
Character. I think a lot of Taya from Yu-Gi-Oh! Taya.
Oh,
she was always supportive, if nothing else.
She's not Taya. Winry's not Taya.
Is she not?
She's not.
What does she do that's more purposeful to the plot in the original?
Literally, she has a skill. So that's already better than Taya.
That's true. She does have a skill. She's a mechanic.
Well, right, and that's the other, and she's like also sort of a prodigy too.
Yeah.
You know, like she's
the best mechanic in the whole country.
Reasonable.
Sure. You have some other female characters like Riza Hawkeye, whose entire motivation is protecting a male character with bullets.
Yeah.
She's a sharpshooter, that sharpshooter. Her last name is Hawkeye, so she has to be a sharpshooter.
Sniper.
That is another trope.
If your name is Hawkeye.
If your name is Hawkeye, you're a sniper.
Yeah, that's it. Alright, who else we got? We got Izumi Curtis, who's the boys' teacher.
Yep. She's also kind of a support role.
And also, interestingly, a lot of her story is revolving around
a failed pregnancy,
and then her inability to then get pregnant. Following that, and also that darn alchemy.
Don't mess with life and death.
Don't do it.
There's hubris involved.
It's bad.
Hubris is bad.
Who else do we have in the original? We've got Maze Hughes' wife and daughter, who again, it's sort of like sad plot points.
Sad plot points. And then you have some female villains who are Lust, the personification of being a central object.
She doesn't kiss anybody either.
She doesn't kiss anybody, despite being named Lust. But she is a lot more fleshed out in the 2003
Yes, she
anime.
Has an incredibly interesting backstory that they really get into, and it sort of informs her motive. She becomes a character who questions what it is that she's doing and why she's a villain.
Why am I a villain? That's a pretty common thing, I think, in a lot of shonen. Anime.
But I'll say this for Fullmetal Alchemist, it doesn't come. The why am I a villain thing for Lust.
It doesn't come out of nowhere.
Well, one, it doesn't come out of nowhere, but it also doesn't result from being beaten in a fight.
That's a good point, It's more internal. It's
more developed through internal and through dialogue and through discovering new information and things like that. Whereas a lot of times in shonen, it's we have a big fist fight, now I respect you, so maybe I'll become good now. That tends to be the sort of way
punch some sense into the baddie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the Naruto Sasuke fight at the end of the Naruto retrieval, or the Sasuke
Quit
retrieval
being stupid!
It's I'll just punch you until you understand that you should leave.
Exactly.
Doesn't work.
And then the big bad of Fullmetal Alchemist is a woman, sort of a dark mother trope.
Of FMA, yes, is a woman scorned.
I don't know if it's supposed to be woman scorned.
She's totally a woman scorned.
It's closer to the dark mother trope, which is supposed to be this reversal of the creator, a destroyer of worlds, through a maternal image.
But she's not maternal at all. She's definitely.
But she's their father's scorned lover. There's she's
a salute.
And I think you kind of see that there's also like a motherliness to sloth in the 2003 version.
Yeah.
Because it's literally supposed to be like their mother but evil.
FMA is like, specifically the original series, the 2003, is like very interested in motherhood.
Yeah,
like,
it's really interested in just like family bonds and like conflicts of family, interpersonal stuff. It's less concerned with like the world and the politics and the destruction of the systems.
Right. It's a smaller story, I think.
Yeah.
On the whole.
Because when you compare it to Brotherhood, the real goal is we gotta take down the military.
And save the world.
And save the world. Instead of, like, stop this woman from using my brother as a stone to keep herself immortal. But then he's just... Oops.
It's different levels of things that are happening.
And it's higher levels of complexity.
But back to women. So Dante is this character. I think she's definitely plays into the like evil is sexy trope. Like she's.
If you say so. I mean, she spends most of the series as like an old woman.
Right, but like once she's in a young body, like she's all about I need the young, sexy body so that I can be young and sexy with the dude I love.
Sure.
Like I don't know. She definitely.
In terms of like shonen though, it's a weird villain for a shonen, but maybe not as weird for a seinen.
I think definitely it's a weird shonen villain because usually shonen villains who are women are incredibly over the top,
and they're typically not the final villain of the series.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's even an example of that.
If there is, please let us know. I'd be really curious.
Yeah, it's typically like they're some kind of early big bad that you get to sort of see, and they're like pulling the strings on some big brutes.
Sure. Like maybe they're even second in command, but they're never the big bad.
But like typically in shonen, the villains are big bad father figures.
Yes.
Or big bad political leaders.
Which Brotherhood has both of.
Yes.
Literally the big bad's a dude named Father.
And a guy named the Fuhrer. So you gotta kill the president, and you gotta kill your dad.
And you gotta kill the president's dad!
To prove that you're stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely plays
literally your dad, because that's who the big bad looks like.
Right. Like it's very much having to do with that like hero's journey, the psychoanalytic side of it.
Sure.
Like if you've ever read Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces, he talks a lot about like overcoming your father and like that Oedipal gotta kill your father because you're obsessed with your mother.
Definitely.
And that's kind of Ed and Al's journey, especially in Brotherhood.
Yeah. So we got ladies like there's in FMA, there's still a lot of characters in it,
right.
But we spend less time with that wider cast, and we spend a more focused amount of time, I think, on the brothers and on their journey. Part of that is because of, I think, even just like those filler episodes in the beginning, which some of them I view as definitely filler. Some of them I think are more important, and I really like.
Filler sometimes gets a bad rap, in my opinion. I think filler is super important to establishing character early on.
Totally.
And to just sort of evening out the pacing in the beginning.
Yeah.
If you have no filler, it can kind of get exhausting, or it can feel like we've reached a point without actually learning who anybody is.
Right, definitely. I think that's something that Brotherhood sort of, in an attempt to get to the new stuff, get to the new stuff that wasn't in the old anime as fast as possible.
It was assuming that everyone had already seen the original or read the manga.
Right, which is, I think, a detriment to the adaptation.
I would agree with that.
But anyway, we don't spend as much time in FMA with that big cast of character and spend that time developing them. We spend most of our time developing
with the brothers.
Which, fine, that's great. I think it's a totally valid choice.
Sure.
It's just a difference, certainly, I think, between the two shows, because in Brotherhood, we get an even bigger cast of characters, and we do spend a lot of time with, like, there's a large portion of Brotherhood where the brothers are actually split up, and so the brothers don't have each other to interact with, they have to interact with the other side cast.
And they all have arcs that are developed and have to be completed in the finale. Which leads to this really, like, bombastic, over-the-top action thing where everyone gets a chance to punch somebody.
Yeah, and like people pair off to defeat their proper villain. And
that's definitely a big thing in Shonen.
Definitely. It's picking which character fights which villain, that sort of thing.
And how does that complete their arc for this particular arc. And arcs are another thing that are pretty big in Shonen.
Yeah.
Arcs are basically long story beats that take place over a series of episodes. And they contribute to the overall story in some way, but they're also kind of self-contained.
Yeah.
Like a season of The Wire.
Sure. So, like, I think a great example of this that's just really easy to understand is, like, One Piece, where it's just like, now we're on this island, and we're doing this thing.
Right.
Now we're on this island, and we're doing this other thing.
Welcome to new island, there's new rules, new conflicts.
Still looking for One Piece.
Right.
Maybe
at the end you'll get like a clue that leads you to the next island.
Exactly.
But if you like tally them all together, maybe none of them had any real impact on the story.
Except to build the characters, and
to further the plot in general.
Yeah, exactly. They're in a lot of things in Naruto. There's the tournament arc where they all have to
tournament arcs are very big.
Exams and whatever. All that. So then I think in FMA, there's fewer definitive arcs, would you say?
Right. I would say it's harder to pick them apart because everything is sort of brought back at the end. There's nothing that's sort of wasted, like there is in Naruto, where you could cut whole seasons of that show, like tens of episodes at a time.
If we're looking for economy of plot and economy of character, you could probably condense a lot of things in Shonen in general.
Exactly.
And still come out with a pretty similar result.
Meanwhile, if you try to condense Fullmetal Alchemist down into one thing,
it's very hard.
It's like impossible, and you could see that in the film adaptation.
Yeah. Oh God, don't watch it. It's bad. Please, just don't. Just for my sake, don't watch it.
I mean, of course, there are plenty of shonen that do end. There are things like Soul Eater, which are very shonen, but do have an ending. But even they have like these arcs built into them, where a new bad guy is introduced. That bad guy is taken care of, and it's revealed that they were secretly trying to stop this other bad guy.
Right. And sometimes I think within those arcs, the goals of the characters do change somewhat. You know?
A little bit. Whereas the goals of the brothers in Fullmetal Alchemist pretty much stay consistent throughout.
Right. But yeah, so I think interestingly, I think similarly, Brotherhood does not have also like as incredibly well defined like arcs as like Naruto or something,
but it has more than the 2003 series.
Sure, yes, I absolutely agree with that. I think in both series we have sort of an intro section where we're getting to know the brothers, we're doing a lot of world building, we're introducing some of the important cast of characters that are going to come in later, and then I think the next arc, as I would call it, is when the brothers go to this town called Dublith to talk to their teacher Izumi, to sort of end up reconnecting with her. Actually, I think maybe they don't go there specifically for her, but they end up running into her. But then while they're there, Al gets kidnapped by the homunculus Greed, and a bunch of chimeras, and a bunch of stuff happens there.
Stuff occurs.
Things happen. And then past that, this is where the two anime diverge, because this was the point at which the manga had basically the original FMA had caught up with the manga, so they had to come up with their own stuff. So they did that, and Brotherhood, following the manga, it sort of goes from there back to
it's like
Central.
A place to place.
It's a place to place sort of thing again, sort of easy to chart that way. They go back to Central, they meet some more characters, some more stuff happens, then the brothers go north to Briggs and have to do meet more characters, more information's revealed, and then there's the final promised day arc where it's the final confrontation day,
right,
which lasts for like 10 episodes.
Whereas I feel like in the 2003 anime, I remember there being a lot more just like, you could be in one place in an episode and then totally go to a different place in the next episode and then be on the other side of the country in a day. Whether that's realistic or not, it definitely made it harder to track, like, where are we in the story based on where we are geographically.
Right. Totally. So I think, just to go back to like romance for a little bit, I think one of the reasons Lust as a character in FMA is more developed is that she's developed along these romance plot lines, sort of. Where it's revealed that she was maybe the woman that Scars, who's the villain in the story, or an anti-hero, depending on which one you watch.
But they were romantically involved in a past life.
Yeah, and so she sort of develops
and they have
feelings.
And they have, sort of like a kinship in that, like, they both have like the separation from their original lives. Scar dropped his name and Lust lost her memories.
Slash is not that
the same person, maybe, but existential questions. I think like what makes a lot of people say that Fullmetal Alchemist isn't shonen is that it addresses a lot of these really complex philosophical questions that, like, are way above the heads of children watching. Totally. Including me when I first watched it. And I loved the action and the fighting, but didn't understand anything about the religious or, existential questions.
Totally. And it's the sort of thing where I think in general, Fullmetal Alchemist, both versions of the show are definitely above child level. The same kid who's watching Pokemon should probably not be watching Fullmetal Alchemist.
They're watching them for different reasons, for sure.
Just like there's so much more blood.
There's a lot of blood.
It's pretty.
A lot of like gruesome genocidal violence. Which are
hard concepts.
Like, at what age do you think it's acceptable to teach a child about the Holocaust and the terrors of it?
That's sort of
the trouble in defining genre here.
Sure. So again, I think this is certainly a more mature version of shonen, if we're going to define it that way at all. But I think to sort of get into FMA being, like, the original series being not shonen, being seinen, versus Brotherhood being more shonen. I think some of the stuff that it does that FMA doesn't do is, again, there's that huge cast of characters, there's that big never give up attitude. In Brotherhood. I think more characters exhibit that than they
That's
do.
More of the theme, even, is the never give up. Because there's so many characters, like, even more than the characters who won't give up, there's the characters who are like, I have to give up, and then the main character will be like, no!
Or it's like, why don't you guys just give up? And they're like, but we can't, and we won't. And so, and I think part of that
How foolish, you're fighting even though there's no chance. Don't you see? That's why we have to fight.
I think a big part of it, too, goes to the philosophical difference between the two shows, where I think FMA is about coming to accept equivalent exchange, that you do have to often give something up to get the thing that you want to get.
In the finale, like, the villain is there to challenge their idea of equivalent exchange, that all the work that they do is definitely going to pay off. So, it's less that they have to accept it, but more like, they have to defend that is the truth.
One, that they have to accept it and also defend it as truth. Whereas in Brotherhood, it's an accepted truth that equivalent exchange does exist. But I think one of the things, sort of in the prologue after the big final fight, is that they're looking, and I think this is a really good, clear description of, like, where they philosophically differ. Is that Al and Ed, they come up with a new theorem where if I give you 10 to get 10, but then if I give you 10 but add a part of myself, I'm adding to something. So you should get 11.
It's more than equivalent exchange.
Exactly. Which is sort of, that's
It's very optimistic and very
one's a lot more
touchy-feely.
optimistic, and the other one is a little bit more grimdark.
Yes. The grimdarkness is that, you can put in your entire self and you still won't get back everything that you want.
Right.
But you'll get something back.
Right.
And I think that's, like, the key, and that's, like, being able to accept loss and accepting not having everything that you desire maybe isn't something that we even would want in a shonen.
Right, exactly. That's a much more mature theme that I think something like a seinen would
deal with. And it's like a deconstruction, like we were saying.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas in Brotherhood, it is very much, not only, I think this is the Shonen Jump,
creed?
Catchphrase or whatever, is friendship, hard work, victory.
Exactly.
And
that's what kids want to hear.
That's exactly, I think, what Brotherhood is, and I think both
There's
stories
a place for that,
are incredibly valid and really great, and I think we should tell both kinds of stories, but I do agree that they're fundamentally different stories that we're telling.
And it might explain the huge divides in fans who really love the manga and Brotherhood, and the fans who are very passionate that the 2003 anime is the definitive adaptation.
Right.
They're both really good, but it's this one example.
They're just doing different things.
Right. And I think it's possibly the only example of a show that has gone from seinen to shonen.
Yeah. I think that's...
Because there's plenty of examples of the reverse.
Yeah.
Trigun famously started out as a shonen, but then switched publishers and became seinen.
Is this the manga?
Yeah, the manga.
Yeah, okay.
The anime, of course, was always seinen because it knew where the show was going.
Right.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is really popular right now, started off as shonen, but like Harry Potter...
Is it seinen at this point?
It started being published in Ultra Jump instead of Shonen Jump.
Okay.
Which Ultra Jump is Shonen Jump's seinen
older
magazine.
Brother.
Yeah, it's the older brother.
Yeah.
And so in later arcs, JoJo's... They all grown up. Yeah. Well, maybe it's just there's more sex and violence.
Okay.
It's much like the PG to PG-13, the middle grade to YA.
Right. So sometimes it's not necessarily a philosophical maturing, it's just a content maturing.
And there is one other example that's kind of the reverse, which is One Punch Man, which in Japan was released as a seinen as part of Young Jump's web series thing. But then in Shonen Jump America, the English language release, it was released as a shonen. Because our ideas of what constitutes shonen and seinen differ.
That's interesting, because I've mostly seen One Punch Man defined as a seinen, just because it does a lot of deconstructing of shonen tropes.
It's deconstruction. And so here, when we're not even as familiar with the tropes as they are in Japan, it just seems like another... It just seems like another Goku.
The same, right. It's the same, but kind of different, but mostly the same.
Right. If you want to see us talk about any of these shows in more detail, absolutely let us know.
Totally.
There's plenty more to talk about with shonen and shoujo and seinen, and we didn't even touch on the older version of shoujo.
No.
Which is something.
I don't know. Is there a thing? I'm sure it is.
Yeah, tell us what it is.
Tell us what it is and yell at us to talk about it. I'm Hannah.
And I'm David.
And this is
Talking Tropes.